As we head into the weekend, but so far it's been a story of foggy morning after foggy morning after foggy morning. We are going to continue to break down what's in store in the way of some of that surface level cloud cover that could limit your visibility on the way out the door. But let's go ahead and talk about rainfall. And yes, obviously we still haven't gotten anything in the way of rain since this past weekend. So we have seen a steady decline. We are now hovering at the very dividing line between near normal and dry for the month of January so far. We have recorded about 0.61 inches of rain so far in the month of January, and that's just up here at Middle Georgia Regional Airport. Some select few spots, maybe even seeing some totals up above 2 inches or even close to 3 inches. Specifically in the Jones County area, one of those areas that did receive the bulk of the rain as of last weekend. But on average, we typically have around 4 inches of rain for the month of January, hovering a little bit behind our pace about where we should be so far about a week into January, but we'll continue to see what the totals for rainfall this weekend will do to some of those numbers. But it is Thursday, and we did get an update to our drought monitor, although any changes are very hard to come by and very hard to even notice, to be honest. Right now, what I'm seeing is maybe a little bit of slimming down with some of this just severe drought area over to the west here in central Georgia, but everyone still remains under moderate drought conditions, which, good news, we didn't get any worse, but bad news is we didn't get any better. So we're still searching for some form of a rainmaker to provide some alleviation with the dry conditions that have continued to be present over the past 3 to 4 months. And I do imagine like we've kind of seen some improvement over the last couple of weeks with this drought monitor. In fact, most of us were under a severe drought as of a while ago. We had portions of an extreme drought right in the near vicinity of central Georgia. It did take maybe about a week or two for some of the rainfall totals to actually correlate to improvement with the drought monitor. So maybe this time next week we could see improvement in some areas farther to the north that did receive their fair share of rain from this past weekend. So your main headlines, the highs are going to continue to hang out in the 70s. They are going to fluctuate a little, bounce around, just depending on how much cloud coverage is going to be in the forecast. Then rain comes later on Saturday. So if you have any plans on Saturday that do implicate maybe needing some nice weather for any outdoor activities, I would go ahead and recommend that you make those plans a bit earlier in the day, because once you get into the afternoon hours, your forecast is going to be less than conducive for wanting to be outside. And then finally, cooling down as we go into Sunday to wrap up the weekend, and that will continue as we go into the beginning of next week. So here's the walk around the quad, where no image is really the same here in central Georgia right now. Still some fog lingering in the picture down in downtown Dublin, so plenty of gray in the sky, not too many peaks of sunshine. That's also the case here at the Georgia National Fairgrounds, where just about an hour ago in time, we actually still had some dense fog. That was even blocking our view of the clock tower here at the West Gate. But very nice up here in downtown Macon. Farther up to the north, we haven't had as thick of fog as areas farther down to the south. So the image in downtown Macon so far this morning is appearing to be mostly sunny. I imagine this is maybe even leading to a bit of a temperature difference across some locations, and some sunshine just to the north of the Georgia National Fairgrounds. Up off Cohen Walker Drive and Warner Robins, actually some peaks of some blue sky, but still some thin fog that is continuing to lift higher up into the atmosphere down there in Houston County. So here's a look at your visibility map, and it still shows areas of dense fog really right here, most widespread in between Dodge, Bleckley, Lawrence, and down into Telfair and Wheeler counties, where the visibility in Eastman still just a couple hundred feet ahead of you. As we go down I-75, another patch of some dense fog as you make your way down to Chris County. Probably not able to get an image of the Crystal Rocket that is down there off the Cordele exit. But farther up to the north, visibility continues to clear up, and I do imagine that this fog farther down to the south will get out of here over the next hour or two. But your dense fog advisory did end at 10 a.m. I think this might have been a morning where it did constitute an extension, maybe to around 11 or even as late as the noon hour. But temperature-wise, we are seeing some numbers in the low 60s already in areas that are receiving plenty of sunshine. So 62s and 63s farther up to the north. As you go down towards the south and the southeast, areas that are still holding on to plenty of that dense fog farther down to the south, like Eastman, McRae, Dublin. Still hanging out in the mid to the upper 50s. So a little bit of a temperature difference. Eventually, as the fog gets out of here, we are looking at maybe a mostly sunny environment to settle in for the beginning of the afternoon. But current temperatures all across the east United States, we are seeing some warmer numbers than here in central Georgia. 74 across the pair of New Orleans and Houston, going down to a 73 in Orlando. 70-degree mark in Jacksonville, but Charleston and Montgomery, our two closest neighboring cities here on the map, are both hovering around the same temperature as downtown Macon, giving you an idea that we still have a very similar setup weather-wise as areas down here to the south and the southeast. And we continue to have the humidity in the forecast. That is definitely for sure indicated by all of that surface level cloud cover formation. Dew point temperatures in the upper half of the 50s, or even some dew point temperatures in the 60s. Still uncharacteristically humid for this time of year. January is typically one of our drier months that we do see, but obviously with the uptick in moisture, these dew point temperatures being very similar to what the actual temperatures are reading, that is resulting in a lot of that low level cloud cover formation. And taking a look at your winds and your wind gusts, nothing in the way of breezy conditions, maybe a sustained wind up to 5 to 6 miles per hour across areas like Milledgeville, Macon, over to Thomaston. Farther down to the south, it's a story of some calm winds, but we will talk about when some breezy conditions do filter back into your forecast. But first things first, we like to talk about the numbers from the previous day, and yesterday's almanac is actually a pretty important graphic because yesterday was the warmest January 7th of all time. 77 degrees for a high temperature that was recorded. 76 was the record that stood since 1989. So that record hasn't had too much time in the record books, only about 35 years or so. But we have gone above and beyond that by 1 degree, and compared to your average high temperature of 59 degrees this time of year, we are hovering around 18 degrees above average. So go ahead and keep that in mind as we go through the next couple of days before our big time cool down does come in. 52 for a morning low temperature, about 16 degrees above your average low of 36. And then we take a look at your record low temperature, 11 degrees back in 2014. So around 11 or 12 years ago, we were blistering cold on January 7th morning. Not the case for this January 7th in 2026. No rain, your departure of rain still continuing to get a steady decrease, going farther and farther down into that negative category. Still nothing worth fretting about. It's once you get maybe in the neighborhood of an inch or two, we can start to get into the category where we really need some rain compared to where we should be at this point in the year. And we're only about a week into the month of January, so a small sample size so far. Once we get farther and farther into the calendar year, that's when we are going to really start to maybe see if we could use some rain or not according to the year departure. But if it was up to my discretion, I'd make it rain each and every day so we could have a positive in front of that number. But unfortunately, I don't have that much control over it. Sunrise, 7:38 p.m. or a.m. 5:44. Geez, I can't say these times right. Sunrise, 7:38 a.m. Sunset going to be at 5:44 p.m. There we go. So sunrise continuing to get a little bit earlier now, and your sunset going to continue to get a little bit later and a little bit later. I know there's about a minute of disagreement amongst that latest sunrise time that we will have now that we are in standard time, but January 1st kind of kicked off this time period where we have seen that latest sunrise. So 7:37, 7:38. Your models are going to disagree just a little bit, but it's roughly the same time all in all. Sunset, 5:39 p.m. So we've already gotten about a 5-minute later sunset since the first of the year, indicating that our hours of daylight are getting a little bit longer each and every day. January 25th is going to be the next important day when it does come to your sunrise and sunset times. Not going to see much difference in between your sunrise time from now all the way into the 25th, but your sunset is actually going to begin to set at the 6 p.m. hour again. So the first time that our sunset does return to 6 p.m. and then that number does get a lot later as we progress into the month of March. So right as we go into the end of February, right before March 8th, the first couple of days of March, your sunrise is actually going to be back before 7 a.m. and your sunset is going to be sometime around 6:30. But then as we do the time change, we are going to shift that time frame back an hour, or forward an hour rather, I should say. That is going to be our spring forward. That is where we are going to sacrifice an hour of sleep in order to get those latest sunsets, And by the time we roll into March 8th, almost 12 hours of daylight. So the hours of daylight are going to begin to get longer than the hours of nighttime as we transition into really the beginning of the spring season. So once we get later and later into March, and I believe it's around March 20th, that first official day of the spring equinox, we'll continue to keep you posted. But there's a lot to look forward to if you have been searching for more daylight throughout each and every day here in Central Georgia. Having a sunset before 6 p.m. Probably have been used to it for about the last 2 months or so now, but it still does feel a bit criminal. We should have that sunset setting at least around 7 o'clock, a more appropriate time, at least in terms of dinner time and in terms of being able to get some plans in with that last little bit of daylight after the workday does conclude. So the month of January, off to a warm start to say the least, especially the last 2 days. 77, I put that asterisk right here just to indicate that 77 was a record-breaking high temperature, but it marked the 7th day in a row that we have been above average to kick off the new year. No signs of a near normal box, no signs of below average numbers throughout the month of January so far. I do anticipate that we're going to add day number 8, day number 9, and day number 10. With some red boxes. So a streak of 10 days in a row to start off the month of January above average before finally we go into Sunday on the 11th, and that may mark the first time that we're at least near average or we are slightly below average for your high temperatures for the first time in the new month. So today, off to a misty and a foggy start, still a misty and foggy environment in those areas we were talking about down to the south and the southeast. But this afternoon, going to have your fair share of some cloud cover, whether it's going to be higher up in the sky, whether it's going to be down closer to the surface. We are going to have a whole bunch of a combination of different level clouds, and I do anticipate all those clouds, whether they are doing a good job of blocking the sunshine or not, are going to lead to slightly cooler numbers than what we recorded yesterday. 74 as opposed to 77. We're still 15 degrees above average. It is still very, very warm for the month of January. And we are just kind of picking at straws, really just trying to nail down exactly what your high temperature will be at. But as a matter of fact, today is another day that the high temperature is very important. I mentioned that we broke that record yesterday with a high temperature of 77 compared to 76. 76 is also the record for today, but set back on a different year back in 1946. So what I have forecast, 74 degrees. Remember yesterday, I had 75 in the forecast. Looked like we were going to fall just shy of that record, but we actually went 1 degree above it. So who's to say that we couldn't go roughly a degree or two above that 74 degree mark as we go into this afternoon? Only time will tell, but I do have less confidence in today maybe at least matching the record or breaking the record due to the fact that we will kind of have some of those clouds in the forecast. And we've continued to go above this graphic, but this does give us kind of a rough estimate in terms of what our high temperature could be this afternoon. 70 degrees, I do feel pretty confident in 74, which I have in the forecast because we have gone a couple degrees above what this graphic has said over previous days, eventually transitioning from the upper 60s to around the 70 degree mark. But it looks like when we finally get to the peak of our temperatures, it's going to be the end of that peak heating window around 4 p.m. and then your numbers are going to steadily decline as we go into the rest of the evening hours. But here's your satellite and radar image where cloud cover is a lot less dense and we do have some gaps in it farther up to the north. So that's why we had a good image of the sunshine up in downtown Macon. Some images of it in Warner Robins, but as you go down to the south and the southeast, there's a whole lot of cloud cover, and it's not just at the surface. There's plenty of clouds that are sitting above the foggy skies that still exist in areas like Dodge County, Bleckley, and in Lawrence County. And it's just a messy satellite imagery all over the southeast. We've continued to have a very similar forecast across states like South Carolina, Georgia, Alabama, back over into Mississippi over the last couple of days. And speaking of what's going on here, we can go ahead and take a look at your surface map, which is quite active as of right now. Believe it or not, we actually have a weak boundary that is sitting over central Georgia right now. So areas down to the south of it still holding on to some slightly more humid air. And I do imagine that this boundary has creeped up a little bit to the north of Macon because areas behind this boundary are a little bit drier. And that's why you don't see as much in the way of cloud cover, indicating that there's less moisture in the atmosphere. But this boundary is attached to this low pressure system that is off the Atlantic coast right now. And then you can see that the western edge of this does connect itself to a stationary boundary, which is attached to a low pressure system back over here into northern Texas and the western panhandle of Oklahoma. It is causing some pretty active weather across the southern plains right now. Eastern Oklahoma, up across most of the state of Kansas, stretching over into Missouri. So you have your fair share of some steady showers, even some heavy showers and some thunderstorms associated with this low pressure system. And this is going to be the moneymaker. This is going to be the thing that makes our weather over the course of the next couple of days and is leading to about 3 days in a row of some sort of a storm risk in areas over to the west of us. Does that storm risk make its way all the way over into the deep southeast? Only time will tell, of course, but we'll go ahead and break down everything that you need to know. So when we do talk about the frontal boundary kicking into gear, you did see it back over there to the west. It's attached to the southern part of that low pressure system right now, centered over in Oklahoma and in Texas. But there's no real change in our forecast throughout today. Like I mentioned, mostly cloudy skies. Maybe the chance of seeing a mist shower or a light drizzle. Still only holding on to about a 10% chance of rain, and that's really just to cover the bases for those select few spots that do get lucky and maybe see a little bit of a rain shower. But even if it does rain and it's kind of in the form of that mist or fog, I wouldn't even put money on that rain actually recording enough in order to maybe tally about 1/100th of an inch at the very least. It's a very, very light shower, and it's something that our satellite and radar imagery hasn't even been able to pick up over previous days. But you won't see the fog here on Future View. You will see plenty of cloud cover a little bit higher up. We are going to start out tomorrow morning nice and gloomy once again. Going into the afternoon, no real changes down in our neck of the woods. If you take a trip up I-75, you are definitely going to notice some changes in your forecast. Widespread showers and even some pockets of some storms up in northern Georgia. And it's really looking like the north and northwestern corner of the state is going to luck out with the most amount of rain. It looks like that frontal boundary does try to traverse over to the east, but then it kind of parks itself and stalls out a little bit just to the west of us. And that's what continues to lead to a good fetch of moisture, as you do see this southerly component to the winds once again. So we do have that moisture coming up from the Gulf, and that's just kind of a continuous line of it ahead of that boundary that will just park itself for a brief moment as we go into Friday afternoon and Friday evening. And still all the rain is kind of on and off up in northern Georgia, northern Alabama over the course of overnight into early on Saturday. So Saturday morning, I would anticipate going to start out very similar to what we start out with on Friday morning, because that boundary has not made its way in just yet. But we are expecting some clearing in the clouds as finally the frontal boundary does kick back into gear and sends us a broken line of some showers and maybe even some storms into central Georgia. Now this is around 3 p.m. This is getting to the end of those hours of daylight throughout each and every day. So 3 p.m., a couple of showers, not even seeing too many dark reds indicating the potential for some storms. But it's really during just this late afternoon window that we will have the potential for maybe something in the form of more active weather. Nonetheless, I do expect at least scattered showers and a couple rumbles of thunder to move in as we go into the late afternoon and evening hours on Saturday. Before 3 p.m., I think you're looking good to go. Nothing in the way of rain will be impacting our forecast. But of course, early in the morning on Saturday, we are looking at some fog to be possible once again. This line breaks apart as we lose our sunshine going later in the day on Saturday, and then it will fizzle out eventually into just simply some scattered light showers, maybe some pockets of some steady rain, and it will be on and off, but very isolated in nature, I would say, by the time we get into Saturday night, and it will continue throughout the overnight hours into early on Sunday, but still just your fair share of lightly scattered showers. Not really going to pose an impact on impacting any outdoor plans that you have, but I hope you don't have any outdoor plans at 4 a.m. on Sunday anyway. So now taking a look at your day 3 storm outlook, I did mention the potential for maybe some more active weather in the forecast, and it's mainly the farther north and northwest that you live. As you go down towards the south and the southeast, the time will be getting later and later, and it's going to be dark outside. Your temperatures are going to begin to cool down, so your severe weather risk does decrease the farther southeast that you go. And this is a lot like last weekend's severe weather risk. This is kind of a cover the bases just in case a strong or maybe even a severe thunderstorm warning does pop up. We did see one severe thunderstorm last week, and it was just to the west of Chris County, kind of around Sumter County, going to the southwest and south of Lake Blackshear. Didn't come to fruition here in central Georgia, so we once again have the potential for it. It's not a guarantee that we will see anything in the way of severe weather, and it really just wants you to be informed about maybe some gusty winds enveloped within this heaviest core of some rainfall, and of course maybe where some flashes of lightning could bunch up together and it may get a little bit loud and a little bit messy outside for a brief moment. Now talking about your rainfall, future view not going to encompass all of the rain. Obviously, we still may have a few showers that linger into the morning hours as we go into Sunday, but right now, still general agreement. Farther up to the northwest, you have the greater chance of seeing maybe something in the way of some more active weather, and you also are going to have some higher rainfall rates. So that's going to result in maybe some isolated pockets that could see some totals closer to 1 inch in nature. It's in all likelihood, you're probably just going to see a couple tenths of an inch of rain. In areas farther down to the south and the southeast, you might not see anything in the way of rain. So I do anticipate most areas will see something in the form of rain, but right now it's looking like simply just some scattered showers. If you do catch something in the way of a thunderstorm, it will dump some more rainfall on you, but definitely nowhere near as much as what they're anticipating up into northeast Alabama, northwest Georgia. You can see a flash of red and orange up there in the corner. That's going to indicate anywhere from 3 to 5 inches of rain that could fall in those spots. And that's because they're going to have heavy shower after heavy shower virtually train over the same area for a very extended time frame. We're looking at sometime in the afternoon on Friday all the way through the afternoon on Saturday. That's about a 24-hour window where rain could continuously fall up there, and we will continue to talk about that in just one moment as well. But in terms of the winds, when are we expecting maybe some gusty conditions? I don't expect much in the way of some really gusty winds until we get into maybe Saturday afternoon. That's when you're going to notice the breeze, an occasional gust up to 23, maybe even 26 miles per hour. And in some isolated pockets, of course, if we are to maybe see something in the way of a stronger thunderstorm, then that's where some of the gusts could get a little bit stronger, maybe 30 or 40 miles per hour. And then it looks like the breeze kind of tries to subside as we go into the nighttime hours Saturday, but it looks like it does build back in after the passage of the frontal boundary itself early in the day on Sunday. So I would anticipate Sunday afternoon to be quite breezy. In terms of the fog, it is looking like it's going to be very widespread once again in central Georgia tomorrow. So go ahead and prepare yourself and set that alarm about 10 to 15 minutes early. I know it's the last thing that you want to do, but it's one more day throughout the work week, and then hopefully you don't have to get up and encounter some of all this low-level cloud cover that is limiting your visibility on Saturday morning. But I promise you, taking it a little bit slower, budgeting for more time on that morning commute will be a wise choice, as we are anticipating yet another dense fog advisory. I believe it might be the 5th or the 6th day in a row that we have seen one of those. Well, we could make it a week-long stretch of that, because fog is also looking likely as we go into the morning hours on Saturday. But like I said, hopefully not posing as many impacts to your morning commute as it would, say, on a weekday, Monday through Friday. Now we go into Sunday, where you can see maybe some areas of thin fog trying to pop up. I'm not putting too much stock into this, but maybe some areas that have some moisture lingering at the surface before the frontal boundary does sweep through. You guys could have some low-level cloud cover on Sunday morning, but not looking to be widespread by any means. Now we look at your humidity map. This is going to be a telltale for where the fog and that surface level cloud cover does begin to pop up. If we keep the light green or even the dark green colors in the forecast, then that's going to create a more humid environment at the surface. But like I mentioned, that all comes to an end as we go early into the day on Sunday. Here's our frontal boundary coming through. Significantly drier air behind the frontal boundary itself and pushing any shades of whatever humidity that we do have in the forecast down to the south and the southeast. And obviously you see the light green color. It's not bad normally. However, for the month of January, when we typically see no humidity whatsoever, I might even classify the light green area as a bit swampy in nature, something that you have not been used to feeling since probably sometime in September, maybe getting into early October. But very thankfully, we're not talking about dew point temperatures in the 70s and the super muggy air that we will be talking about come around 6 months into the future once we go into around May and June. So over the next 3 days, what do you need to know? Still virtually the same forecast, just a bit more cloud coverage in the forecast today and tomorrow. But I do anticipate some peaks of sunshine tomorrow that may allow for a warm up into the upper 70s. Upper 70s still going to flirt with some records, but I don't think it's really going to do anything in terms of breaking some records, because your records actually go up as we go into Friday and Saturday all time. And a really good chance of rain, 70% chance of seeing something in the way of rain throughout Saturday afternoon into the evening hours, but I have highlighted the thunderstorm icon on there as well because we have the potential for some rumbles of thunder. Not too confident in anything in the way of severe weather, but of course we will keep you posted if anything does pop up. Here's a look at your afternoon highs. Still well above average, still way too warm for the month of January. That all comes to an end in between Saturday and Sunday. 20-degree temperature drop, 77 down to 57 by the time we roll into Sunday afternoon. And if that's still too warm for your liking, which I can't imagine it would be, but 51 degrees as we roll into Monday afternoon. It is finally going to bring back that winter chill into the forecast with not only your afternoon highs, but your morning lows do get on board eventually. Slightly chilly, but still above average by about 8 degrees on Sunday morning. That's because the front won't have quite made its way through. The cooler and drier air won't have fully ushered in as we go into Sunday morning. However, once we get into Monday and we are expecting some clear skies, allowing those numbers to go as low as they can go on Monday morning, we are expecting to dip back below the 30-degree mark. And just for safe measure, in case you haven't seen it and haven't really been listening to what this cold front is going to do for your forecast next week, it drops the humidity completely out of here. We saw some signs of that already. Shades of no color, or I guess not even a shade, but areas of no color. You're just going to see the landscape of the earth on those dew point temperature maps. We're not going to be talking about any sort of humidity and hopefully nothing in the way of fog for a good duration of time as we roll into the beginning of next week. So here's what the long-range models have. Still a couple of spotty light showers just hanging around for the early morning hours on Sunday. If you don't wake up until noon or later in the afternoon, you're very likely not going to see anything in the way of some cloudy skies or anything in the way of some spotty showers. Going into Monday, nice and clear as we start off the new work week. Tuesday also looking nice and dry. And by the time we go into Wednesday and Thursday, we could see some weather systems around us, but not seeing anything that's really indicating some widespread rain. It looks like all the widespread rain chances are out of our neck of the woods, down to the south, over to the east, off in the Atlantic Ocean. So not really posing any impacts unless you have a January deep sea fishing excursion planned out over off the coast of the Carolinas. But something we will be on the lookout for because, yes, it's not necessarily an immediate risk for us here in central Georgia, but we do know severe weather or anything in the way of heavy rainfall. It does not necessarily obey these boundaries that we give them, but this does give us some general areas to be on the lookout for. For the green color being some isolated flash flooding, that's more so just some nuisance flooding. And then as we go into the yellow shade, that's going to be more instances of some flash flooding. Yes, none of these are in central Georgia. It's to the west, it's to the northwest of us, but we're following it up with another risk, another marginal risk of some isolated flash flooding up in North Georgia and as you get into the western Appalachian Mountains. Now, why do I mention this? Because all that water that falls up there has to go somewhere, so it's going to flow downstream, and many of our rivers up to the north that do eventually flow down into central Georgia, we could see some of that water increase the river levels as we go into the beginning of next week. It will take some time for that water to make its way all the way down here, but it is something we'll want to pay attention to, especially maybe if you have any plans to be over by the river, you had plans for an outdoor picnic, maybe at the beginning of next week, you'll want us to continue to stay focused, or if that does pertain to your typical 9 to 5 and you are doing some road work or maybe anything that's going on, some utility work over by the rivers, the Ocmulgee, the Oconee, and the Flint River. Had a bit of a brain fart there. But here's a look at your 7-day forecast. 10% for a chance of rain, maybe a light mist or a sprinkle throughout today and tomorrow. Still well above average until finally that front comes through. Sends us a couple storms, but mainly just some widely scattered showers throughout Saturday, late afternoon into the evening hours, and we'll still have some rain continuing overnight, maybe into the early morning hours on Sunday. And then after that, clearer and cooler conditions persist into the beginning of next week. Morning low temperatures go down as low as the upper 20s. Afternoon high temperatures well down into the lower half of the 50s. Finally going to add some blue boxes to that graphic of high temperatures I have continued to show you. And it does look like we are going to get an extended stretch of high temperatures in the 50s. That's what a lot of the models are saying as we go into the end of next week.